Anjo was running through the forest, holding Na-Yeon's hand, and every time she glanced back, the girl was always looking behind them. She knew she was probably hoping that Cheong-san would pop out behind them, without a scratch on him, without him being a monster, but as much as she wanted that, she knew it wasn't possible. Namra was struggling to stand as the sound was getting louder and louder till she couldn't run anymore, and Soo-hyuk had to pick her up and piggyback her as they kept running. The forest was barren. They had expected to see at least a zombie, but none of them were there, likely drawn by the sound. "Come on, guys, we're almost there," Soo-hyuk said as they kept pushing. They hadn't had a moment to rest in however long, and now they could almost see salvation. Cheong-san had been running for a while as he kept shouting to draw the zombies till he glanced behind him and saw Guinam's face drawn in a smile as he closed in behind him, pushing zombies aside. "Cheong-san!" He said the name with a smile as he started closing in behind him. Cheong-san was glad that he didn't at least go after the group. He couldn't imagine the group fighting him right now after they had already been weakened. They had barely escaped last time, and that was mostly due to luck. He didn't mind using himself as a sacrifice. He had to lead him further away. He headed into a building as Guinam fell to his knees because of the blaring sound, but soon got up after a while. The zombies that were with him had run off towards the school, but he didn't care as he could hear Cheong-san's frantic breathing as he ran up the stairs inside the unfinished building. Guinam got up and went in hot pursuit after him. Cheong-san was already running out of breath. He could feel his body starting to go numb, and tiredness was falling upon him, but he knew he had to hold on. Cheong-san made it up the building as far up as he could and looked around and saw nowhere else to go. This was it. He turned around with a metal bar in hand as he waited for Guinam to arrive. He didn't have to wait long. Guinam burst into the last floor, looking around like a frantic animal, before his eyes landed on Cheong-san, and he smirked. "You really don't die, do you?" Cheong-san said, still out of breath. He was trying to psych himself up because he knew he was going to die here at this monster's hands. "I'm going to take your eyes. Then I'm going to break every bone in your body before I eat you and kill you," Guinam said, stalking closer and closer towards him. Cheong-san raised his metal bar, tightening it as much as he could, even in his tired state. Guinam feigned an attack, and Cheong-san swung at him, but he easily dodged it, laughing at him. But Cheong-san maintained his stance at the ready as the two circled each other. Guinam swung at him, and Cheong-san dodged as the two began their bout. Cheong-san swung a couple of times, managing to catch Guinam off guard a few times, which seemed to piss him off as he finally charged at Cheong-san. Guinam tackled him to the ground as they both threw punches, rolling on the floor, but it was already clear who was stronger. They rolled around a few times till Guinam finally got above him and held him down, laughing at him. Cheong-san didn't stop struggling, but it only seemed to amuse Guinam as he continued laughing in his face. "If only your little girlfriend could see you now," he said, before looking down at him, the laughter and smile fading into a cold expression. "I will take the eye you owe me now," he said, and Cheong-san realized what he meant and went to try and protect his eye. Guinam easily overpowered him as he held Cheong-san's head down, trying to gouge his eye out. Cheong-san fought as much as he could, but he could feel the difference in their strength. It wasn't him putting up a fight that was slowing Guinam down. It was almost as if the monster was savoring it. Guinam finally grew bored as he gouged at Cheong-san's eye. Cheong-san let out a scream so loud that he didn't believe it came from him, as his hands quickly went to cover his now bleeding eye socket. Guinam licked off the blood, smiling as he looked at Cheong-san writhing and screaming in pain on the ground as he played with the eye before he ate it with a smile on his face. In the distance now, getting further away from the school, Namra suddenly said, "Cheong-san," which brought the whole group to a stop. "What do you mean, Cheong-san?" Soo-hyuk asked her. Anjo was listening closely, and she could feel Na-Yeon tense in her grip. I heard him scream," she said the words with her head down, and before Anjo could really grasp what that meant, she felt Na-Yeon break her hold and turn to run back toward the school. "Na-Yeon!" Anjo shouted as she started to take off after her, but saw most of the group hesitating. She looked at them, and they looked away, not meeting her eyes. She knew why they didn't want to go, but she had made a promise to Cheong-san, and she was going to keep it. Anjo took off without giving them another glance, trying her best to catch up with Na-Yeon. But it wasn't long before she started hearing the pattering of feet behind her. Namra got off Soo-hyuk's back and started running, knowing well that she was pushing herself beyond her limits, but she was faster than them, and she sped past the group. Using her powers, she easily caught up with Na-Yeon, immediately tackling her to the ground because of some primal instinct that was building in her. She looked down at the now scared Na-Yeon, who was staring up at her with a fearful look, before she felt Anjo's hand on her shoulder and shook off the blinding hunger and quickly scrambled away from the two. Anjo looked at her warily before looking over Na-Yeon to make sure she was okay. "Everyone get down!" Namra shouted at the group, and they knew that the bombs were going to drop, so they all ducked. Cheong-san was laying on the ground, watching Guinam laughing his ass off. He knew that the bombs were going to drop any minute now. He heard the first of them drop in the distance and rushed toward him. He had been forming a plan in his head to make sure Guinam died for good this time as he charged at him from behind. Cheong-san locked his arms around Guinam's shoulders in a full Nelson and stumbled backwards as Guinam tried to pry him off. But at the same time, the bombs went off all around them, and Cheong-san could only tuck in behind his back to shield himself from the blast as they were blown back. Cheong-san heard Guinam let out a scream as he was charred by the blast, but he held firmly to him even as they were blown off their floor down the elevator shaft, engulfed in flames. His life started flashing before his eyes. He remembered his dad, his mom, their store, and all the nights his mother tasted new recipes on him and his father. He thought back to when he met Anjo and how they ended up sticking to each other like glue. She was his only friend till they met Gyeong-soo. They both never expected to get along with someone like him, as he was loud and brash, very much the opposite of the two of them, but somehow they had made it and stuck together for years. His life went by in flashes, till it somehow stopped on his first meeting with Na-Yeon. The first time they had met, they hadn't even glanced in each other's direction, and he hadn't remembered it. The moment had been brief, and she was so far in the distance. But somehow, at this moment, the memory was so clear with her face highlighted among the crowd. More flashes came showing all the times they had crossed paths and they hadn't noticed each other, whether that was catching her glimpse in the window or somehow seeing her in the corner of his eye when he was on the bus home. They had met so many times, but he had never noticed, till the flashes arrived at their recent moments. Her killing Gyeong-soo, him rushing after her, finding her scared and alone, face streaked in tears, embracing her as she cried through the night, them holding each other, and their talk, their kiss. The last image that he saw was her smiling at him after they had kissed in the back room. He hadn't seen her smile a lot, but when he did, he wished he had seen it more. The group heard the blast and felt the heat come off it almost to the point they felt they were on fire in their own clothes. Everyone waited a while till the rumbling settled down. Everyone slowly looked up and around the area. Some of the places were already charred, but that didn't matter to Na-Yeon as she only had Cheong-san on her mind. She took off again, but this time Anjo was right next to her, which surprised her for a moment before she remembered how important Cheong-san was to her as well. The rest of the group followed, trying to keep up with the two, but also looking out for any stray zombies that were left behind. The group was only met with ash and smoke as they rushed and jumped over some charred bodies that were crumbling on arrival. Na-Yeon and Anjo were looking around frantically before Namra interrupted them. "This way," she said, as she took off in another direction. They followed her wordlessly, and as they got further in, they were only met with more carnage. They went up some stairs, and before long they were on a floor of a building. But no one was there. But Na-Yeon saw the metal pole Cheong-san had been using as a weapon when they parted ways on the ground and rushed toward it, picking it up. There was a lot of blood on it, and there was more on the floor. She was shocked, and just looked over at Anjo, silently trying to utter something, anything. "What's that?" they heard Daisu say as he looked down the incomplete elevator shaft. The group rushed there, and all they could see were charred bodies stacked in piles, all of them trying to reach up. They saw a jacket. "Is that Guinam?" Na-Yeon asked weakly as she stepped back before collapsing to her knees and bursting into tears. She started crying out loudly, and she soon felt arms wrapped around her as Anjo settled next to her crying as well. She couldn't believe it. Namra just watched the two crying as they embraced each other. She knew she had to be quick. They couldn't wait any longer. She couldn't wait any longer. "We need to go,"